Hi, my name is John Light, and I've spent over 20 years working throughout all corners of the recruiting world. Our podcast, Drowning in the Tech Talent Pool, is a resource to help you stay afloat and get ahead of your competition. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Drowning in the Tech Talent Pool. I'm your host, John Light, president of Sabretooth Recruiting. And today I have something really special, and I judge specialness based on someone's story, I think, to a great degree. And I love stories where people have to overcome things and maybe come from behind. I root for the underdog. It's a habit. I was raised that way, and it's carried forward through adulthood. And so today I have with me Adriana Cowdin, an expert in personal branding, a 25-year executive career coach, and also an entrepreneur who's been voted into the top 1% of women small business owners in America. Adriana, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much, John, for having me. I appreciate it. And I take the underdog badge as a badge of honor. So thank you.
Well, underdog can have a lot of different meanings. Yeah. When I played football in junior high school, I wasn't the underdog because I was a big guy compared to other people in my class, right? I get the last couple of years of high school, and I'm actually a year ahead of my age class. So I was 17 when I graduated, and suddenly everybody's bigger than me. I'm like, wait a second. That's not right. Settle down, folks. And, you go from being, well, this guy should win to, well, maybe he will, maybe he won't. And sometimes being an underdog, though, is also about coming into a new industry or taking on a new endeavor. Sometimes it's about overcoming challenges that just confront us along life's journey, that we all run into. And, I'd like to think that if we step up and our response is such that it resonates, I suppose you could say, we come out the stronger for it in many respects. So I'm hoping as we get started, Adriana, that you would share a little bit about your story so people can get where I'm coming from with this. And maybe then we could dive in and some of the really fantastic stuff you've done and take a look ahead of what the future holds as well.
Sure. And you direct me if I'm going in the wrong direction or you want me to share something more or less. But I always say I have been out on my own since 17, which is a nice way of saying I got kicked out at 17. And so that was over 30 years ago. And so in addition to like my formal education and my bachelor's degree and my management and leadership through Harvard, I went to the school of hard knocks. Like I really had to learn how to support myself. And so I feel like I've always had this kind of fiery little spirit in me that has just grown as I've gotten older. And that has led to a lot of professional success in my case. So I climbed the corporate ladder, went up through the C-suite. In your intro, you mentioned I was an entrepreneur. I led a digital marketing agency for just under 8 years before selling it. And I've been doing coaching, executive career coaching for 25 years. But in that time, I have also battled immense health challenges. So I live with 10 or 11 diseases. Honestly, you just stop counting at some
after a certain point. Yeah.
Another one. And I've had 31, 32 surgeries and procedures in the last 8.5 years. And so I don't say that for people to be like, oh my God, like to scare them or think that I'm amazing. It's just, we all face some sort of adversity, right? Like for me, it's my health. For other people, it might be personal relationships. It might be their career. It might be finances. It might be family. Everyone has something. This is just the gift I was blessed with in life. And I always say I'm happy I have it because if someone else had it, maybe they wouldn't have made it through. Or maybe they would be struggling more. So it's definitely made me the person I am today. And honestly, John, continues to challenge me on a daily basis.
Yeah, but in spite of those challenges, look at what you've accomplished. And I think sometimes we overlook the hills that other people have to climb to get where they're going. And sometimes we overlook the hill that maybe we had to climb to get where we were going. And it can be a real challenge, I think. And to me, dealing with your health is one of the biggest challenges out there. It's one thing to deal with, am I on the ball mentally or not, or emotionally? But when your body's not cooperating and you feel tired, or you feel like, man, I can't surmount this. I can't even climb the stairs today, much less handle a video call or get in the office and go for 10 hours. I think it's some of the hardest stuff out there. But I also think that folks ought not pack it up to the locker room. If there's stuff you want to do, and maybe it's career driven, maybe it's accomplishment driven, maybe it's experience driven. When my first wife, we fought terminal cancer for a number of years. But one of the things we determined to do is, our two oldest children were teenagers. We had another child who's single digits, but we wanted to give her, as much as she is physically able, as many experiences with the kids for them to have the memories to carry forward. And it's not about then, okay, I expect you guys to make straight A's, because I'd always give them the glower of a concerned parent. A's and B's, kids. Anything less is unacceptable no matter what. But we're also going to make time for you to go with your mom to a Def Leppard concert, which they did, or to Legoland, which they did. I love that.
My husband is just entered his 30th season with IndyCar. He's I always have to share, he's a rocket scientist by education, which I'm very proud of, but he's like, stop telling people that. He's so embarrassed. But he runs engineering and competition for an IndyCar team. And so they travel a lot. Pretty much every weekend between February and September, middle of September, they're on the road. And early in our relationship, when I was really, really sick, I was like, I'm going with. And so I remember this particular race in Sonoma, California, and we're in Indianapolis, so quite the distance to travel. I was wheelchair bound, and I was super, super sick. And he just never told me no. He was like, if you think you can do it, we will find a way to make it happen. And kind of the culmination of that, which is that essence that you did with your wife, like, we want to create these memories, right? So we waited a long time to get married. I wasn't interested in it, but I finally gave in, and we got married in 2018. And I remember in 2017, and at this time, I don't even think I was able to get out in the wheelchair. I was still pretty bedbound. I said to him, I want to climb Mount Kilimanjaro for our honeymoon. And he was like, I'm sorry, you what? I was like, yeah, I want to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And so this is what my husband does. He doesn't say, hey, crazy, you can't even walk to the front door. What are you thinking? He says, okay, now let's discuss this, because he's, very logical. So
he's an engineer. He's going to sort it out. Yeah.
Right. He's going to I'm going to find a way to do this if I have to carry her on my back. Like, he's all about creating these experiences for us. So he puts on the YouTube videos of what it's really like to climb and go to base camp and all of that. And I'm still convinced. I'm like, I can totally do this. Right. So he's like, okay, let's talk to your doctors. My doctor was like, how are we going to get you off a mountain when you're dehydrated, malnourished, and having a pancreatic attack? And I was like, well, now that's a good point. So needless to say, we did not do that, nor could I have. But it's that mentality of I can do whatever I put my energy and effort into, with occasionally some physical, modifications or exceptions. But it's that creating memories. And I always say to people, whether you're transitioning your career or whatever, your personal brand is about who you are. It's not your job title. It's not just what you do, but it's really about who you are and how you do what you do, and conveying that in a clear and concise, purpose-driven way. Right. So I had to share that, because your story about hey, the kids can totally leave school to go to a Def Leppard concert. I would have made the exact same decision.
Oh yeah. Well, it was Def Leppard and, oh goodness, there was another band with them, but they were both these 70s, 80s, big rock bands.
Big hair bands.
Which Karen loved, the kids loved. And I'm like, we're in town. Well, yeah, let's make it happen. I sent her and our oldest daughter, and they stayed in a hotel in Times Square and saw Hamilton on Broadway.
Oh, wow.
It was stuff
memories,
like that.
You can't replace
I can't,
those are priceless.
at the time, I remember how much they cost.
Oh,
And in my mind, I'm making the calculation, and this thought occurred to me: what value can I put on this for our girls a decade or two or three down the road?
right.
When they look back and remember stuff, are they, because when someone leaves, when someone passes away, over time, we tend to remember more of the good stuff than the bad stuff.
Yeah.
And especially dealing with a parent-child relationship. And I really think I like your husband's disposition. Well, let's figure this out. And if there are limitations that we don't want to butt up against or has too much risk involved, then that's fine. You know what? We'll find something else, but at least we'll both understand why and be on the same page about it because we see the reasoning behind it. And I appreciate that. And I appreciate something you just said, because all this time as an executive career coach, and there's a difference, I think, and correct me if you think I'm off base, please, between coaching someone who is a director, VP on their way into the C-suite or currently in a C-suite role, and coaching someone who is in the first 5 years of their career.
Oh, big difference. Yes.
Just like when I look at a resume for someone who's 5 years out of college, and I'm like, and I look at a resume, somebody who's 15, 20 years, and I talk about, well, you need to use the STAR principle: situation, task, action, result. A junior accountant doesn't have much of that available to them versus a person who's a director. But I'm wondering if you might be able to share a little bit about personal branding in a career context, especially given, here we are, and I don't always like to throw dates out on these podcasts, but it gives context. Here we are closing in on the second quarter of 2024. And the dirty secret in the job market is there's been an inversion in some industries where the senior level hires have shifted. Lots of people have been laid off. I personally have a member of my advisory board who's basically on the beach for 2 years. C-suite level, CHRO.
Yeah. It's common right now.
She's just starting again, but 2 years. And you know what? I know her branding is on point. I know her resume is on point. I know her personality, her interviewing skills are on point. And so there's a lot of frustration. So when you look at it from, okay, here's my image I put out in the market, and whether it's a LinkedIn profile or social media, whatever it might be, but also the integrity of that when you get face-to-face or on the phone. I'm wondering if you have some thoughts that you might share that could be helpful for people in general who are struggling through this time.
Well, let me go back to something you said, which was right after I had talked about myself. You said we don't always talk about our own accomplishments and accolades, right? It is very hard to create your own personal brand just in a vacuum by yourself, because we overlook our accolades and our accomplishments, and we are our own worst critics. We look in the mirror and I'll be like, oh, I have a little flyaway, and someone else will be like, oh, your hair looks great, but it's everything we do goes into your personal brand. So again, the biggest thing I can tell you is it's who you are and who you want the market to see you as. So you're right. This dirty little secret is that 2023 and even the beginning of 24 has been horribly difficult, particularly for executives. A lot of them have been on the bench a year plus, 10 months going on a year. The personal branding, I always say, takes into account a lot of things. So I wrote an article for Forbes, and this was probably 10, 15 years ago, on Steve Jobs' personal brand. And so I had written it because I wanted people to understand your personal brand connects through everything you do. Like in today's environment, he would have brand collaborations with New Balance and Levi's. That was what he wore, and always a black shirt, right? Like someone would have created the Air Jordans of New Balance for Steve Jobs, right? But he was also known not just for his wardrobe, which if you look at Silicon Valley, it shifted how everyone started to dress. He was also known for being customer obsessed and design obsessed. He didn't create a product because he thought, oh, this will be a great product. He was like, this is missing, and this is what a customer would love. And he continued to learn throughout his whole life. So you extrapolate that to an Oprah Winfrey, right? Completely different. Also a billionaire, wears all kinds of colors, but she is known for her personal health weight struggles, her outspoken personality, and her, I mean, for lack of a better term, like get shit done. She didn't take no for an answer. So she didn't like retire from being a talk show host like a Sally Jesse Raphael and go off into the sunset, right? She is still very active in political movements, in the weight loss movement, which we could go down that rabbit hole. But so her brand is bigger than what she does for a living. And that's kind of the purpose of personal branding. So just to connect it back to someone career searching, it's really about everything you do thoughtfully. So please, if you're job searching, lock down like your Facebook and your Instagram, because everyone will Google you that looks for you. And all we want them really to see is your LinkedIn. And if you have a, like a resume website. But everything from the colors you choose, make those consistent, make your LinkedIn profile banner consistent, to the photos you choose, to the way that you speak. Are you a very casual, witty person, or do you prefer to be very formal? All of your communications, particularly on LinkedIn, should focus on that. And then there becomes this point where you become such an expert in what you do, you don't end up having to look for another job. They start coming to you because they go, hey, I know that Walt drives revenue for PE-backed companies. That's the one thing he does. Everything he talks about is that. And yes, you want to sprinkle in some personal things. You don't want to be like a robot.
Right.
But that is his mission. And so when I need someone to drive revenue in a PE-backed company, I already know who to call.
Well, it's interesting, that you throw out Steve Jobs and you throw out Oprah, because to me, and this is just me talking out loud, most people can't relate to that beyond, wow, this is a great case study.
Right.
Right. We sit back and we look at our resume and we go, look at this piece, but it's skinny. I haven't accomplished anything like what they've accomplished. And so I think one of the barriers we run into is, how do we translate that in a way that, and when I say Joe Average on a street corner, I'm not talking about Joe Average on a street corner, but I'm talking about your typical executive, which is not sitting in a Fortune 500 company.
Nope.
Although there are a lot of those. There are many, many more. There was a great article earlier this month. Oh man, I'm trying to remember the name of the group that put it out, and it's just leaving my head. But they had gone back and studied who had open jobs, and that the data that their most current was a year earlier, March 23. And what they found is that 75% of all job openings in America were with companies with fewer than 250 employees.
Yep.
Which that used not to be the case at all.
And it's the small business engine that runs this country.
Yeah, and many of these people who are on the beach or on the bench, however you want to look at it, I think are sitting back and they're a VP of sales or a chief marketing officer, a COO or CEO or whatever for a company with a couple hundred people. And how does that person take this idea of personal branding pragmatically? And I know there's two answers to this, but bear with me just a second. And pragmatically turn that into a compelling story that resonates in the marketplace for their next step in their career. And the first way I know is real easy. You just need to look up Adriana Cowdin on LinkedIn and reach out to her, and she's squared away. But from a pragmatic point, what are a couple of things people could do that would give them ideally some bang for their buck?
Yeah.
In terms of getting noticed within the context of their profession.
So I'll give you a couple tips. One, and this is one of my favorite, this is a CMO client I recently worked with. And so I love this because she is known like in the industry, and she's in smaller companies too, smaller, not Fortune 500. She is known for her branding. She could not brand herself. Like she just had every time she'd send me one, I'd be like, and so, a couple things. Harvard, I don't know if it's business school or resource, has these value cards. They're free. It's like 9 values to download. You print them out and cut them up. Knowing your values is one, because you want to communicate that. 2, lean into who you are. And so I talk about that CMO person because where she landed was she's a marketing dragon slayer. And I was like, oh my God. What does that mean?
Is that on her profile?
Right. Yes. And honestly, she started this series called the Dragon Slaying Chronicles. about like how to slay a brand and how to slay the beginning of your marketing and all of this, it works for her. Why? Because she's a gamer. Like she's really into like Dungeons and Dragons and she speaks in that world. And yes, it's totally unique. If someone had told me, you need to talk about yourself as being the career dragon slayer, I would have been like, no. It has no connection to me personally, right? It doesn't mean anything about me and it wouldn't connect to me. So figure out who you are and lean into that. Now, maybe you don't want to get as different as Dragon Slayer, right? Like I also had a client that was like, I'm a chaos tamer. To me, that's the opposite. It says nothing about what you do. Like a lot of executives tame chaos. That's part of what we do all day, every day, right?
Right.
But tell me who you are. Tell me what your values are. And so there's two kind of ways to do this. One is what I call the 15-15. Distill it down to 15 words that you can say in less than 15 seconds. So if you get in the elevator with the board chair of a, $150 million company, and he says, hey, I'm John, and I say, oh, I'm Adriana. What are you doing here? 15 words, 15 seconds. And that should do nothing than elicit, oh, tell me more, or I'd love to talk to you, or I know someone you need to connect with. And then you go into what we always do for every product or service, which is your unique value proposition. Identify those things that are very unique about you. And that should be no more than 2 or 3 sentences and 30 seconds long. Because there's two things interesting about career search in general. People love to talk about themselves. So the goal is to get whoever you're interviewing with to talk the entire time. Keep asking them questions every time they ask you one, answer, and then ask them one. The more they talk about themselves, the higher your chances are. But in terms of personal branding, you just want to create that conversation that pivots with, this is why I am unique. Here's the value I offer. Whether your company is Fortune 100 or has 5 people, I can offer the same value to you. It's just up to what I want to do and whether I choose to work with you.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of that resonates with me because I counsel candidates all the time in interview prep that they cannot ask binary questions in an interview. And invariably, one of two things happens. Either the phone gets totally quiet or they go, oh, yeah, I get it. And by that, I mean, you can't ask questions that are yes and no answers.
Right.
You want to drive answers built around how, what, when, why, where. Because ideally, that interviewer is doing 65, 75% of the talking. In my perfect world, because to your point, people want to talk about what they're passionate about. If they're trying to hire you, not only are they interviewing you, but you're interviewing them. And you've got to treat it like a two-way conversation where it also gives you a chance to showcase, and I would say in our conversation, your personal brand. So part of what I hang my hat on is I'm curious and I want to learn. And so I'm always asking questions. And I'm asking good questions, usually. I don't know. Some of these episodes may have some bad questions. I don't know. But some of them I know I ask really good ones because I want to get the other party talking.
Yeah.
Teach me something. Tell me something you're passionate about. Let's learn. Let me learn something. And I enjoy that. It's led me to break into some different areas in my career that I might not have gone to. I mean, I started out as an accountant. Good grief. I mean, I lost my hair. I probably had sleeve garters and a green eye shade when I started. We still use 10 keys with ticker paper.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You have to learn the 10, like you have to know how to use a 10 key. Yes. I learned that early on I don't even know if I was in my career yet or I was still in school when I learned. I mean, I took typing. So I'm sure you did too.
My first audit prof was a former Cooper's partner, if I remember correctly, Dr. Flagg. And he was a hoot. And he would tell us how they would have 10 key by touch competitions when they were footing and cross-footing audit papers, the schedules and whatnot. And, these long, like 8-foot long ticker tapes coming out to see who got it right. I mean, it's like, and when I got into accounting, it was, batch processing. You put all your entries in, hit a button and leave, come back overnight. And we still used WYSIWYG.
I love WYSIWYG. I still use that term, but it
hate
only works
WYSIWYG.
with
I love the
certain.
term. Yeah. It's like, man, my fingers don't remember every, combination pattern to get around that thing.
Yeah.
But I'm sure if you went around and asked new grads today or people who are in their career, hey, did you learn any cool DOS applications in college?
So
They
that's
might
funny.
have no clue.
No, my stepdaughter is a junior in college. She's actually graduating next December. She's graduating a semester early, but I will never forget. She had to take, keyboard typing and
Right.
in high school. And she was so mad. I don't understand why I need to take this. No one types anymore, blah, blah, blah. And so her dad and I were like, well, you have to send emails from the 1800s. No one uses it. I was like, oh my gosh, like the mentality shift. And do you know there's actually a course at Google, or there has been in the last 2 years, where they teach their new hires how to properly use email? Because many of the new grads don't even use email. They think that if you don't have an instant message response, you're just not functioning properly.
Yeah. And you know what scares me? It scares me too, that there's this unspoken compact in the job market that if I'm a quality candidate and I do the right things, I can expect someone to be interested in me.
Yeah.
And to make me an offer at some point. In the past year or two, that thing's shredded and burned.
Yes.
Volcanically. It's gone. But I'm really worried about young folks coming out and folks like you and I who are further along in their careers, that we have a mismatched set of expectations between what the market is willing to do and what we expect it to do.
Yeah.
And that's true in any relationship. If you come out expecting, well, I need instant responses to everything and I shouldn't have to type anything out. All I need are my 2 thumbs and a bad attitude.
Yeah. Yes.
That's not the way the world works. When I came out of college at A&M, we'd go to the computer lab and we could toggle between Excel and Lotus.
Oh, I hated Lotus.
And when I came out for my first job, I get to this desk and there is a cathode ray tube terminal in front of me, green. I'm looking at it, the stuff comes up, and this is my introduction to WYSIWYG. I look at my boss, I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this? And he says, oh, it's WYSIWYG. I'm like, is it WYSIWYG? And he goes, what you see is what you get.
Yeah.
And that was my introduction. It's like, wait a second, I'm at this multi-gazillion-dollar global company. I just came from College Station where I could work in Lotus or Excel, and I'm good in both. And now I got to come learn a DOS-based spreadsheet system that was onerous at best. And my expectations were I would just step right into Excel. And I think what a lot of people are missing right now when it comes to things like AI.
Yeah.
There's this expectation. Well, I hear so much about it that it must be taking the world over in terms of, being implemented and integrated across and adopted across all these companies. I spoke to a Fortune 1000 CIO last year. And he said, no, man, we're slow rolling this stuff because there's risk involved with it and it's adaptation with all these other existing systems. And so what companies have been doing, and I see it a lot in talent acquisition, management, retention, areas where I play and you play at least tangentially with executive coaching. They're taking an existing process and they have this AI tortilla and they're wrapping it up and making a burrito.
Yeah.
And it's adding extra calories and maybe it moves faster because instead of using a fork or a spoon in a bowl, you could hold it in your hands and eat it. But you really haven't improved things. You just made them faster. And
it's interesting that you mentioned that because a lot of my, I speak to larger groups and a lot of the questions in the larger groups is like, how do I get my resume through these applicant tracking, these ATS, applicant tracking systems? And I'm like, okay, first of all, if that's how you're trying to get a job, you need to start over. Like you're never going to, I said, first of all, they're only as good as the system can be. So if you live on French Street and they need someone who speaks French, you'll get through. Like it's not, it's a system, and now they're all AI powered. And so it's keywords and it's phrases. And I said, yes, I can teach you all of those tricks. I would much rather teach you how to build and elevate your personal brand and how to talk to humans because people hire people. They don't hire paper and systems don't hire people. People hire people. You need to get to a human. Like that is ultimate goal. And there are so many tools, AI empowered, that help you do that. And even like there's some great AI tools that'll write your resume for you and your LinkedIn profile and cover letters and thank you letters. If that's not your strength, like, I mean, I don't mean to pick on you, John, but like if you're an accountant, English and grammar may not be your strength. That's coming from someone I know who's a CPA, and that is not his strength. So if that's not your strength, lean into the tools that allow you to do that. But understand it's still a tool. You're the human. It has to sound like you. It has to be authentic. So take it as like a shell and then edit and revise, or send it by a friend for some second eyes if you don't have a career coach. But the same thing goes with your personal brand. You want to take a go at it, use an AI tool. Pop your resume into ChatGPT, say, build me a personal brand in less than 15 words with these 3 values, these 3 strengths, and based on this experience, and see what it pops out.
Yeah.
It's probably not going to be great, but it's going to be better than not having one.
Right. But I think that's one of the terrifying things about building your own brand is I have to be able to verbalize and articulate this in a written format.
Yeah.
And, one of the coaching points I give candidates in interview prep is go pick 10 sample interview questions. I really don't give a rip which ones they are. Just pick 10. I want them to handwrite out a 2 to 5 sentence answer for each one.
I do this with my clients too.
And then I want to turn around and I'll tell them there are 2 ways to do this that get you the best bang for your buck. Number 1, stand in front of a mirror. Number 2, tape yourself, video yourself. And I want you to read the questions out loud. Then I want you to read the answers out loud. If it doesn't sound right when you finish, go back and rework those. Yeah. So do it 2 or 3 times. Just that little bit of practice of aligning your brain with your mouth will set most candidates in the top 5%.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of how they communicate in an interview, which I think is critical, because you can't demo in an interview that you're a good communicator and that you are curious. You have an intellect that is driven by, hey, I want to not only see this, but hey, how can I solve that problem? How can I demonstrate my cognitive diversity and my capabilities? Well, you do that with everything, every question you ask, every answer you give. So you ought to practice. If you're an accountant or you're a software engineer and you don't practice articulating this stuff, get some practice in. You'll stand out from the crowd.
It's interesting.
But I think
oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, when you come to the branding piece and you have to write this down.
Yeah.
I think it's terrifying. It's daunting for a lot of people to do that.
It is. And that's why, like, you work with an executive coach, like with me, we co-create it. I can't sit in a funnel and just create a brand for you. It doesn't work that way. It's a co-creation process. And we start with this in-depth assessment that kind of identifies some of those key strengths and values in your natural leadership style and your adapted leadership style. And we do that because, again, people aren't good at identifying that for themselves. You're not your own mirror. And so that gives me, it's about a 45-page report that this assessment, kind of delivers using predictive analysis, et cetera. And it gives me a good starting point, because then I spend a few hours like, let me dig into this and let me come up with a 2 to 3 page summary that we can then spend the next few sessions kind of going back and forth on. Does this fit with you? Does it not fit with you? Do you feel like this isn't appropriate? And then we come up with 2 or 3 kind of statements. And then I'm like, socialize those with people who know you. Talk to your partner, talk to your best friends, talk to your parents. I mean, oftentimes our parents don't even know what we do for a living. I mean, my mom has no idea. So it's interesting, talk to someone who doesn't know what you do for a living and see what their response is. Then talk to someone who knows you really, really well and see what their response is, because again, to your point, you have to be able to articulate it really well and naturally, very genuinely and authentically. The interesting thing about interviewing, one of the tips I teach my clients, and I do the same thing, like, here are the 10 questions, write down your answer to these, send it to me. Let's work on these. Let's practice these, practice them in the mirror, record yourself. Is the question you can never answer for a company is fit. Are you going to fit? Will you be part of their culture, et cetera?
Right.
So I always tell my clients, job descriptions are not rocket science. Like half of the time they're half AI written and then some human has added to them or some hiring manager wrote something. And oftentimes you'll see 2 or 3 phrases or keywords repeated over and over and over. So I always go, I know this is old fashioned, print out the job description, highlight the phrases that are repeated over and over, and then let's find a way to work those phrases into your answers. Not in like a lie, you know, don't lie that you've managed multinational projects if you haven't, but let's find a way to use their language when you respond back to an interview question, because it subconsciously answers that, will they fit in my company? Do they understand what I really need in this role?
Let's talk about that for a second, because I know you've been at some name brand companies, Sears Holdings, ADT, and my favorite, even though it's not a name brand like those others, Decaf Digital. Recently, I think you've been in some great places. When I look at fit as a headhunter, I look at how the hiring team goes about its business. And when I interview the candidates, potential candidates, I want to learn how they go about their business. Because in my mind, if the how we go about our business aligns, then I've got a cultural fit. Now, I may not have a cultural fit in the sense of, in the sense of somebody's coming here and fitting and we're trying for, or not fitting because they don't go socialize after hours and that sort of thing. But
I'm not talking about that either. No. Yeah.
And how we go forward together as a team, as a unit, as a business, because you can't take, in my opinion, it's very hard to take, and I'm not picking on accountants today because I have been one for a number of years way back when, but if you take an accountant out of an actuarial setting in an insurance company and they're very methodical, they're very set, man, the pathway was blazed, the trail was blazed years before he got there, and I'm just doing the same thing, so on and so forth. And you drop them into a serial entrepreneur shop.
Mess.
Doing something unrelated. Because I need an accountant. Well, great, this person's available and they're the right price. No, because you're dropping them from where they things made sense, how what you went out of business to this place is chaotic and probably doesn't make sense. And holy smokes, they fly by the seat of their pants. Or like I did an interview one time years and years ago in the 90s. I walked in suited up because that's what the recruiter told me to do. I'm just accountant, this is a controller, assistant controller position. People are wearing flip-flops, board shorts, eating pizza and drinking beer. And I'm like, whoa, wait a second. I'm a little overdressed. So I'm like ripping my tie off and shoving it in a pocket. But you have to align to how we go about our business. And in my opinion, one of the best ways to figure that out is you tell candidates, well, situation, task, action, result, STAR principles, how you should format answers, get quantifiable results. Flip that around and ask the interviewer for their STAR or 2. Hey, I know we're talking about this big project. I did this with a client last year. They're implementing a new ERP. Well, how's it going? Well, we've been trying to implement it for about 18 months. Okay. So there's obviously some challenges going on, right? So let's talk about that. What's working, what's not, and how much of this relates not to the fact that you're implementing a new ERP, but about how people have gone about it. And it turned out the guy leading it was the issue, and he couldn't make a decision. And I did a search for a client a number of years ago where they needed, what was the role? It was a master data role in an SAP environment, but the person it reported to, he interviewed, I said, look, this is the best candidate I found, and here's a couple of others I think that are potential, but this guy I think is the best. Let's interview and see what you think. Interviewed him. Oh yeah, I love the guy. Not ready to make an offer. I want to see more people. Went on for 11 months until the hiring manager lost his job. And he never filled that role. The next guy in, guess what the first thing he did? This was literally from January to December, middle of December. Hey, is so-and-so still available? I said, yeah, but man, you talking about me having to do a sales job to get his interest. No problem. I want to interview this guy. Interviewed him, had an offer. He started beginning of January. It was a 12-month process because how the hiring manager went about his business didn't align with the needs of the organization. And that was a death knell. And we spend way too much energy when we're not aligned trying to be aligned, trying to give the facade that we are when we're not. We got to change. We got to align this before we even say yes to a job or yes to a candidate. And I wonder how you can communicate that in personal branding.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing that you bring that up, because I have a client right now who she has been interviewing, like in the process very slowly, for 12 months with a major insurance company. And they are still like recrafting the job description and the title, and they're moving this. And I said to her, I get this is like your end all be all company you want to work at. But have you sat back and looked at, how does this fit with me? I said, you're a fast decision maker. You know what you want. You're very clear about what you want, and you're very direct. So far, we have a 12-month ambiguous process. They have changed what they've wanted 3 times and said they're really not even sure yet. And I always say that the interview process is like the honeymoon phase, right? Like, this is when you've just met your special someone, you're still dating, it's amazing. It's not going to get better. Like, all of a sudden, all the creepy stuff, like your freak flags start to fly, or you stay overnight and they're like, I don't like their sheets. Like, as you learn somebody, things change. But this is as good as it gets. So if you are interviewing with a company, pay attention. They're showing you their hand. They're showing you how they make decisions, how they work together, how their process functions, exactly like you said. And if that doesn't align with who you are, it's not a fit with you. And that goes back to, if I know my personal brand really well, I can quickly assess that. And I have to say, I get that it's very hard to look at a company and be like, no, thank you, when you've been on the bench or the beach for over a year, right? Like, I'm going to take anything that comes my way. That's not a good idea, because you'll be in and out of there in 90 to 180 days. Your decision or their decision, or both, it's not going to work out. I mean, you have to really understand what works for you. And I'll use Sears Holding as an example. I worked in one of the most innovative, technologically advanced divisions. We did amazing things with technology. We moved faster than any company I have ever been at since. And anyone who was in that division will say the same thing. And by the way, I worked with some of the most intelligent, talented people. And what I will tell you is, people that left that division and went to other companies, typically big retailers or other Fortune 500s, are like, it's so slow here. I can't stand the pace. And I'm like, yeah, well, you have to look. They hired a bunch of us from entrepreneur situations or from very nimble, chaos-filled organizations, knowing that that's the talent pool they needed. And it was attractive to us because that's the kind of situation. So if you come out of this very fast-paced, like, go by the seat of your pants, get stuff done, and you go into, let's use your example, an actuary environment, and there's process and methods, and I mean, you're going to pull your hair out. It's the same reason why someone who joins a small, nimble organization, 5-10 years down the road, as that organization matures and grows, is like, hey, I want to stay for my payout, but I'm not functioning well here. It's not working. Well, because now it's a mid-sized company, and you have to get approval, or gosh forbid, you have to fill out a job rec before you just go hire your best friend.
Whoa, wait, time out. We can't have paperwork.
Exactly. Yeah. It's so different. And that goes back again, everything goes back to really understanding who you are. And that's why you see your personal brand isn't like, I'm an executive career coach. Yes, that's what I do, but it has to talk about who you are. So interestingly enough, every time I meet with a potential client, and I always do a complimentary consult, I always say, not everyone is a fit for me, and I am not a fit for everyone. I am very direct. I am results oriented, and I will keep you on task with your goal, and I will move fast. If you're slower to move, if you like to talk around and talk, but you're not necessarily motivated to hit the end goal, or you want someone a little softer, that's fine. That's just not me, and it's not a fit. And you have to know those things.
Oh, absolutely. Let me ask you this as we get close to wrapping this up, because I think it's been a very informative conversation. And I think there's a lot in here for people to take away from this.
Yeah.
But let's talk a bit about passion and what you're passionate about. I know we talked about it briefly in a prior conversation, but what's a particular passion project or avenue or channel that you're always looking to promote and engage in and make a difference in your life, not just, professionally, but personally as well?
Yeah. I spend a lot of time on knowledge sharing. That's kind of what, I never had biological kids of my own, and my stepdaughter has her own mom, so my legacy is the knowledge I leave behind when I'm no longer here. So whether it's writing a book, which I did, published my book in 2010, or, writing for the New York Times, or even writing blog posts and doing podcast interviews, speaking to groups, I'm heavily focused on knowledge share. And I feel like it's because I get more than I give. There's never a time I speak to a group or do an interview or write a post where I don't learn something that I didn't know before that.
Awesome. I think it's the right disposition to have, frankly, when it comes to that, because they say you only get what you give, but we often find out we can get a lot more if we're generous with what we have.
Yeah.
So, Adriana, thank you so much. I'm indebted. I appreciate you carving out the time.
Sure.
And I'll be excited when we turn this into video clips and get it posted.
I can't wait.
I think there's a lot in here, and I think there's a lot of pragmatic information. But let me ask you this one other question. If someone is listening to a clip or someone is listening to the full podcast, seeing on YouTube, whatever, and they wanted to reach out to you, would it be better to go via LinkedIn, or is there a website you'd want them to go to?
They can always go to LinkedIn, which is fine. Just spell my name right. It's not easy. What's easier is just go to BeBoldExecutiveCoaching.com, and everything's there.
BeBoldExecutiveCoaching.com. Adriana Cowdin, thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, John.
We're going to be talking again soon, but in the meantime, thanks for joining us on Drowning in the Tech Talent Pool.
You've been listening to Drowning in the Tech Talent Pool. This podcast is sponsored by Sabretooth. Sabretooth improves the quality of hire and speeds up the time to fill specialized machine learning, data engineering, data science, and developer roles, stretching tech recruiting budgets further by bringing the precision of retained search and the speed of contingent search to the market in one complete solution. Find out more at sbr2th.com and follow me, John Light, on LinkedIn. Thanks for listening.